Kale stood in the middle of his cabin, the cold metallic clang of his armor echoing through the small space, and wondered briefly if someone had rigged it to audition for a percussion concert. He tugged at the last strap of his gauntlet, grumbling about the ridiculous number of belts and buckles humans had decided were necessary for survival. It was a dusty planet, mostly abandoned mining colonies and erratic sandstorms that could swallow a rover whole, yet here he was, meticulously preparing for what was supposed to be a routine patrol. Routine, he reminded himself, but that word had a funny way of lying to soldiers. The moment he adjusted the chest plate over the faintly glowing tattoos etched across his torso, a movement in the corner of the room caught his attention. He froze mid-strap, the holographic display on his gauntlet blinking at him like a mischievous child. She was there, standing with hands pressed lightly to her chest, as if she had stumbled in by accident but didn't dare leave. Her skin had a subtle shimmer, almost like the surface of an unpolished crystal under starlight, and her long ears twitched, betraying a nervous curiosity that seemed both fragile and intense at once. Kale had expected to find smuggler footprints, rogue robots, or maybe a dust-dwelling sand sprite, but certainly not a humanoid stranger with the grace of a creature born in zero gravity. He raised one eyebrow and quipped, "You know, most people knock before sneaking into a human soldier's quarters, but hey, I'm flexible." She tilted her head, unimpressed, her ears flicking like antennae in response, which made Kale snort quietly. He glanced down at the tattoos that wrapped around his arms and chest, the intricate lines and symbols almost pulsing with the faint energy of the planet itself. When she noticed them, her breath seemed to hitch, her fingers twitching toward him before she hesitated, as if touching him might set off some ancient trap. Kale chuckled and said, "Relax, I'm not radioactive, just mildly confusing." Her eyes stayed on the markings, and for a moment he wondered if she understood more than she let on. He lowered himself to sit on the edge of his bunk, loosening a strap to let the tension drain from his shoulders. "So, do I scare you, or am I just mildly fascinating?" he asked. She stepped closer, slowly, carefully, her long ears brushing against the sleeve of his armor as she reached toward the tattoos. Kale held up a hand. "Okay, first things first, I don't bite unless you ask nicely." She hesitated, then made a tentative gesture toward the swirls of ink, her expression torn between curiosity and caution. Kale grinned and said, "Ah, you're one of those curious about ancient secrets types. I respect that. I'm just surprised you didn't trip over something on the way in." She blinked at him, and in a way only an alien could, the gesture felt almost like a laugh. The cabin's hollow fireplace flickered to life at his command, a small circle of warm light in the otherwise dim and metallic room. Kale leaned back, scratching his head and mumbling, "Note to self, teach aliens human humor, step 1, never start with sarcasm." She mimicked his scratching motion awkwardly, her ears swaying as if trying to understand his odd way of expressing thought. He laughed and she tried again, this time more accurately, and Kale realized that the bridge between them was beginning to form, one awkward, fumbling motion at a time. He stood and gestured to a metal crate. "Sit, or hover, I'm adaptable." She sat, tucking her long legs beneath her, and Kale noticed that she didn't entirely obey Earth gravity the same way humans did. She seemed lighter, almost buoyant, though the effect was subtle. He held up his gauntlet, opening a small holographic pad with flickering icons, then said, "Ever seen tattoos that can do more than look pretty? No? Well, lucky day. Yours truly is a walking, breathing data archive, courtesy of some long-forgotten ink magic and poor life choices." She leaned forward, her elongated ears flicking forward in intrigue, and Kale felt an odd sense of satisfaction. At least someone was impressed. He gestured at one of the tattoos on his forearm, the lines curling and twisting as faint light moved beneath the skin. "This one," he said, "records energy fluctuations in the local environment. Mostly handy when you want to avoid stepping on live plasma streams, but occasionally it shows stuff from my past, dangerous, confusing, occasionally embarrassing." She made a sound, half-gasp, half-amused chirp, and Kale laughed aloud. "You know, for someone with long ears, you're really expressive." She tilted her head and he added, "Yeah, that counts as a compliment." Hours passed in a combination of cautious observation, playful teasing, and occasional startling displays from the tattoos. Each time a symbol lit up or pulsed with energy, Lyra would reach out instinctively and Kale would pretend to be offended. Hey, I'm not a light switch. She rolled her eyes, a gesture that seemed universal, and he nearly choked laughing. Somewhere between the laughter and the flashing tattoos, the unspoken tension that had filled the room earlier dissolved into a curious companionship, a fragile but undeniable connection forming across the unlikeliest of bridges. Human flesh and alien wonder. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon outside the cabin, painting the desert with streaks of molten gold and violet, Kale finally leaned back, tired but oddly content. Lyra's long ears twitched in the fading light, catching shadows that only she seemed able to perceive. He watched her carefully, noting the mix of awe and amusement in her gaze. So, he said with a grin, if you came here to steal secrets, you've got a terrible plan. But if you came to make a friend, congratulations, you just passed the trial. She tilted her head, nudged one ear toward him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt the smallest thrill of hope that maybe, just maybe, the universe had handed him something extraordinary, something beyond missions and patrols, something worth laughing at along the way. The night deepened. Outside, the wind carried the whisper of the desert, and the faint hum of distant energy fields vibrated through the floor of the cabin. Lyra finally reached out, fingertips brushing a tattoo on his arm, her touch light, hesitant, yet full of curiosity. Kale smiled wryly. Careful, that one occasionally talks back, mostly insults though. She laughed, or something like it, and he realized that this was only the beginning, a first step into a story neither of them fully understood but both were eager to explore. Kale led Lyra out of the cabin into the late morning haze, the air sharp with the tang of metallic dust and faint ozone from distant storms. The ground beneath their boots, or in Lyra's case, the near hover of her weightless steps, crunched with a rhythm that made Kale think of a percussion solo gone wrong. He squinted at the horizon, where jagged crystal spires jutted from the desert like forgotten monuments to a civilization that had long since vanished, and muttered, if you ever think humans pick boring planets to live on, just remember this place is advertised as a tourist trap in exactly 0 guidebooks. Lyra's long ears twitched at the words, catching every syllable as though she had a built-in translator tuned to sarcasm, and Kale grinned. Her expression, half curiosity, half exasperation, made him feel like he'd just told a joke that only half the audience understood, and that half was judging him. They walked in silence for a while, punctuated by the soft hum of energy lines beneath the desert's surface. Kale's tattoos, reacting instinctively to the field, rippled faintly across his arms. Lyra's gaze flicked to each pattern in turn, her eyes widening at the subtle glow and movement. Do they bite? She finally asked, in the low, musical hum of her own language, which Kale could only interpret through gesture and intuition. He chuckled, holding up his arm as if demonstrating a sword move. Only if you try to wrestle me, otherwise they just gawk. Her ears flicked in amusement, and Kale thought he'd just earned the first real laugh of the day, a laugh that sounded like wind through tall crystal towers. The desert shifted beneath them as they crossed a ridge of fine silicate sand that whispered like a living thing. Kale's boots sank slightly with each step. Lyra's feet barely disturbed the surface, her weight distributing in a way that made her look almost ethereal. At one point, she stepped on a loose rock, spun, and caught herself by reaching toward the nearest crystal shard. Kale couldn't resist. Careful, or you'll summon the local wildlife. Last time a crystal serpent tried to gnaw my boot. She glared at him, but her ears twitched in a way that suggested she was suppressing a grin. By midday, the pair reached a series of jagged rock formations, small canyons that twisted and turned in ways that made it impossible to see more than a few meters ahead. Kale motioned for Lyra to stay close, though she hovered just behind him, ears twitching at every echo and shadow. His tattoos began reacting more intensely here, lines glowing brighter as if trying to speak to something only the planet understood. Lyra reached out tentatively, brushing her fingers against the faintly vibrating lines. Careful, Kale said, trying to sound serious but failing as he added, they bite sarcastically. She looked up, long ears angled in mock offense, and Kale laughed, realizing that their journey, dangerous as it could be, had become a dance of teasing and learning to trust one another. The canyons opened into a plateau where the sand gave way to jagged crystal pillars, larger than any Kale had ever seen, some reaching 100 meters into the sky. The crystals hummed faintly, vibrating with energy that caused Kale's tattoos to flare like fireflies. He flexed his fingers experimentally, and lines of ink traced symbols that even he didn't fully understand. Lyra tilted her head, eyes scanning the glowing patterns. Her ears twitched in rapid succession, and Kale guessed she was communicating with herself in some way that humans had no equivalent for. He raised an eyebrow. "If you're plotting to eat me, at least do it politely," he said, grinning. Inside the remnants of the structure, the air was thick with residual energy, and the tattoos on Kale's chest flared brightly, casting moving shadows across the crystalline walls. Lyra reached out to touch one of the glowing symbols on the floor, and Kale followed her gesture with his own hands. The pattern pulsed, and suddenly a holographic projection flickered to life. A series of maps, energy schematics, and cryptic markings that neither fully understood yet. Lyra's eyes brightened. She muttered something under her breath, and Kale, reading her gestures and the hum of her tone, guessed she was excited. He leaned in, joking, "Congratulations, you just activated the world's most confusing light show. I hope you enjoy interpretive dance because that's all we get for instructions." Her long ears twitched in amusement, and Kale laughed, feeling the first real thrill of discovery, tinged with humor, curiosity, and a growing sense of connection. As the suns began to dip toward the horizon, Kale and Lyra sat atop a low crystal outcrop, watching the light scatter across the desert like spilled jewels. The tattoos across Kale's arms pulsed gently, reflecting the energy of the planet and the faint glow from the distant facility. Lyra leaned against him slightly, ears twitching in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Kale shrugged, smirking. "Well, that was a productive day of almost getting fried and discovering ancient alien tech. Not bad for a Monday." She made a sound that was a mixture of laughter and incredulity, and Kale felt a spark of something dangerous and exhilarating. The sense that together they might survive the weird, absurd, and sometimes deadly universe, all while making it slightly more fun along the way. Kale and Lyra descended into the collapsed facility, the jagged crystal pillars overhead humming faintly with residual energy that made the tattoos across his chest pulse like a living thing. The air was thick with static, tiny arcs of energy crackling along the walls in random bursts. Kale muttered, "Nothing like a little mild electrocution to keep the blood pumping. Makes Monday feel exciting." Lyra's long ears twitched sharply, a reaction Kale decided could mean amusement, exasperation, or a subtle warning, all of which were equally valid. They navigated narrow passageways littered with debris from the facility's collapse. At every step, Kale's tattoos glimmered, responding to hidden energy conduits beneath the floor. He flexed his fingers experimentally, watching lines of light shift across his skin, forming patterns he had never consciously drawn. Lyra reached out to trace the symbols with her fingers, her ears flicking in delight as she hummed a soft tone that Kale interpreted as, "Yes, that is significant." He shrugged. "Significant in what way? Galactic secrets or just an old wiring diagram for interstellar coffee makers?" Lyra tilted her head, her expression unreadable, but Kale had learned by now that long ears had a subtle way of laughing. At the heart of the facility, they discovered a chamber untouched by collapse, its walls lined with crystalline panels that glowed faintly with stored energy. Kale's tattoos flared brightly in response. He stepped closer, tracing the edge of a panel with his fingertips. The lines on his skin began to shift, rearranging into complex glyphs that matched the panels. So we're talking interstellar mood lighting with instructions hidden in tattoos. "I get it," he said, half serious, half joking. Lyra, however, was completely absorbed. She pressed a hand to the nearest panel, activating a holographic map that spread across the room in shimmering blue light, highlighting points across the galaxy that pulsed faintly, almost like heartbeats. She finally spoke in a mixture of her language and the rudimentary translations they had pieced together. Kale listened, nodding as best he could. From what he understood, his tattoos were not just markers of his past missions. They were keys, bio-coded glyphs that could access hidden archives, unlock dormant technology, and perhaps even prevent conflicts that span star systems. Lyra's people had been waiting for someone with his exact tattoos, someone whose experiences resonated with the encoded histories of countless civilizations. Kale scratched his head. "So let me get this straight. I'm basically a walking, glowing universal USB drive, and you're here to rescue me from obscurity?" Lyra's ears flicked in amusement, a soundless laugh vibrating faintly in the air, and Kale grinned. They spent hours exploring the chamber, activating systems that revealed historical battles, energy networks, and cryptic schematics. Kale's tattoos responded, illuminating pathways and controls, sometimes triggering minor safety systems with harmless but startling effects. At one point, a stream of holographic data erupted across the floor like a cascade of light, nearly tripping them both. Alien slapstick comedy, Kale muttered, sprawled on the floor. I approve. Lyra, hovering lightly above him, tilted her head and flicked her ears, which he took as a silent, perfectly judgmental giggle. As night fell, the facility's main archive came online, revealing a star map pinpointing strategic outposts and hidden energy hubs across multiple systems. Kale realized with a thrill that bordered on fear that his past missions had been subtly guided to prepare him for this moment. His tattoos weren't just records, they were a network, a safeguard left behind by civilizations long gone, waiting for someone capable to activate it. Lyra's voice, gentle but urgent, explained that the system could stabilize regions on the brink of collapse, prevent energy catastrophes, and even restore fractured alliances. Kale, leaning back against a crystal wall, muttered, "So basically I'm a superhero now with glowing tattoos instead of a cape." Noted. Lyra's long ears twitched, conveying a mixture of amusement and exasperation, and Kale laughed. Together, they activated the final interface, and the chamber hummed to life, panels glowing brighter, data streams converging into a central node. Kale's tattoos flared in synchrony with the system, and for a moment he felt an overwhelming connection, not just to the facility or its creators, but to the galaxy itself. He looked at Lyra, whose expression reflected awe and joy. "I think," he said slowly, "that we just became the galaxy's most unconventional problem solvers." She reached out, touching his forearm lightly, her ears brushing against his chest in a gesture that felt almost human in its intimacy. Kale felt a warmth spread through him, realizing that the journey had changed him. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was a bridge between worlds, a link in a chain of histories and futures he was only beginning to understand. When the systems quieted, the holographic lights dimming to soft pulses, Kale and Lyra sat together amidst the crystalline glow. The tattoos on his body still flickered softly, but now they felt less like a burden and more like a guide. Lyra leaned closer, ears twitching in a rhythm Kale could feel more than see, and he realized he no longer feared the unknown. The laughter they shared during minor mishaps, the teasing of near misses, the ridiculous holographic traps, they had all built a camaraderie that transformed tension into trust, fear into curiosity, and loneliness into companionship. Kale flexed his fingers experimentally, watching the tattoos trace glowing lines across his skin. "You know," he said, smiling at Lyra, "I thought tattoos were just for bad decisions in my 20s. Turns out they're interstellar keys." "Go figure." She laughed, this time a sound he could almost interpret, and flicked her ears at him in mock reprimand. He chuckled, realizing that humor had been as essential to their survival as caution or courage. When they finally left the facility, the twin suns of the desert world were rising, scattering light across the crystal dunes like spilled gemstones. Kale paused, taking a deep breath of the crisp, electrified air. He felt stronger, more connected, not just to Lyra, but to the universe itself. The journey had revealed secrets of his past, unlocked responsibilities he hadn't known he carried, and forged a bond that transcended species. Lyra looked at him, long ears flicking in the morning light, and he realized that the unspoken promise between them was mutual. They would face the galaxy together, laugh at its absurdities, uncover its mysteries, and protect its secrets when necessary. Kale had begun the day as a lone soldier, wary and burdened by his own history. He ended it transformed, a living key to ancient knowledge, a partner to an extraordinary being, and a man who had learned that even in a universe vast and unpredictable, trust, humor, and curiosity could light the way. He grinned, feeling the tattoos pulse softly like tiny stars under his skin. "Ready for round two?" he asked. Lyra's ears twitched,